After years of planning, building, and preparation, the International African American Museum will finally open its doors later this year. Joining us with more on how we can support the mission is Dr. Tonya Matthews, the museum's president and CEO. Great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me. So excited to be here.
The museum, it has been a very long time coming. I can't remember a day that I've lived in Charleston that we weren't talking about this. Can you tell us about sort of the nascence of where this idea first formed and the process that has now taken you into 2022?
Sure. Of course, as you've mentioned, we have been more than 20 years in the making from a fledgling idea and announcement in former Mayor Joe Riley's State of the City address. Was when the first time the idea was brought to the public. And then we brought on some amazing people from our own Congressman Jim Clyburn to be our first board chair, bringing in historians from all over the country to help us work through the kinds of ideas that we would have. And then picking the perfect site, the absolute most perfect place to build this museum. And we broke ground just about 3 years ago. And so we're coming into the home stretch now as we're filling out the outside of our building and our gardens finally.
Yes, and I want to talk a little bit more about what's going inside, what's going outside, but Charleston truly is hallowed ground for an international African American museum. Of course, there are many African American museums all across the country, but Charleston in particular, this is going to be a special home.
Yes, this is a very special home. Of course, the African American story begins centuries ago on the continent of Africa, but here in America, Charleston was a bit of the epicenter, right? This was one of the primary ports of entry for enslaved African peoples to come into this space. And the museum has the privilege, if not the responsibility, of being built upon the site of Gadsden's Wharf, one of our nation's most prolific international slave trading ports. So it does form a grounding space for our story. We have pride of place, but we also ensure that we tell what happened before, what happened during, what happened after. But definitely Charleston, the Low Country as a whole, has a very special and critical place in understanding the American story, if not the global story, of the African American journey.
Most definitely. And in fact, when you say that Charleston being really an epicenter for the slave trade, 45% at least of Africans that came to this country passed through Charleston City.
Which is an extraordinary number. And of course, historians will have variations of the number, but I think what's really critical there is to really understand that we were part of the wealth that came with this African genius. We were part of the systems that were designed to keep the industry in place as long as it was. But that means we're also the home of some of the foundational cultural elements that are now quintessentially American, from the music to the food, to the resilience, to the kinds of conversations that we can have. And it also means that with that level of a percentage, that many African Americans will be able to trace their roots right to the spot where our museum is being built. And we're hoping to become a bit of a site of pilgrimage in that space.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because that is one thing that I absolutely wanted to touch on. I think it is so remarkable that one can come to this museum and they can actually learn about their lineage. Of course, living in Charleston, as I've come to learn, names are very important, and you see the interconnection of everybody who is sort of from here, linked by names. But here, this is at a genetic level in some cases.
Yeah. So I think in terms of thinking about that, so when we talk about African American genealogy, frankly, the period of slavery represents a significant blip in our ability to trace our heritage. As we think about families being separated multiple times, as we think about individuals not being recorded by name, everything from the roles of those who held slaves in bondage to the United States Census itself. And so it came to us that we could develop a specialty in genealogical research related to these very unique challenges and stories, which of course helps everyone, but is essential for thinking about African American stories and heritage. And imagine being able to genetically or through the roles trace yourself to a spot and then being able to physically visit that spot. I think that's kind of holy grail category for a lot of people. So I'm excited that we're going to be a fundamental part of that.
Oh, most definitely. That sounds very exciting indeed. The building itself, it is going to be beautiful, both inside and outside, the various exhibits and the opportunities to also learn. I know that you're working with the library and giving people an opportunity to really understand and learn about their heritage and their neighbors' heritage in this case. Now, we're looking at it, opening your doors at the end of the year, but to help you continue your mission, what are you asking our viewers today?
So I'm asking viewers for a few things. One, of course, our charter membership program is still open. These are folks who raise their hand to support the museum, tell folks you believe in us even before we get the doors open. But we have wonderful things for folks to do, which leads me to my second request. Join the programs. Yeah. Check out our website at iaamuseum.org. We've got programs. We've got an event calendar. We've had genealogy workshops. We're talking about major moments and historical workshops. Authors will come to visit us as well. So we definitely want folks to participate virtually or, as times are changing, physically in that way. And I think last but not least, please tell everyone, absolutely everyone. We are located right here in Charleston, but we're also a national museum. So if you've got relatives out of town, let them know. Absolutely.
Dr. Matthews, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to checking in with you a little bit later in the year as we get closer and closer to those doors opening up.
Look forward to welcoming you all.
Thank you. We're back after this.